largest instead of the tiled version, but if you don't want to see it really large, that's okay too. You can flip-flop there. So I will be switching back and forth. Thank you for joining us. Happy Tuesday morning, and I'll share my screen now so that we can take a look at our presentation. And what you may find is as you're doing these, as we were talking and Kenneth was sharing with the bandwidth, sometimes if you're on Zoom, what it'll do now is there's a delay a little bit in even switching over or getting back to your slide. If you notice that, remain calm with it. Just tell someone that you're working on it, because people really do realize that this is certainly a different time. So we are here for establish, maintain, and growing trust. So with that, trust is a bit of a puzzle for some people, not necessarily personally, but sometimes. But in business, it takes different things. So we want to think of trust as how do we line it up? It takes a lot of people, and yet it really starts with you. And that's what we're really here to do. As the goal for we have an hour set up. I'll speak for about 20 minutes and certainly answer any questions, whether it's about this or something else. If it's about the chamber, then Kelly may chime in with that. So this is your time, and we appreciate your being here. So we want to assist you in establishing, maintaining, and reinforcing trust in this time of uncertainty. And while it's really timely to talk about this, the tips I will share with you will likely be great for all times. So as we look ahead, we're going to cover 4 things: the importance of communication, how to and not to share information, 3 elements of trust, which is that article that was published in Tampa Bay Business and Wealth magazine. I put a link to that in our chat at the beginning, and then the next steps for moving forward. So in order to be trusted, you must be found trustworthy, and that's part of weaving this all together. So as we think through it, trustworthy is being accountable, it's not being perfect. So I encourage you to think about, we all make mistakes. We have people mowing the lawn when we thought we were doing our webinars. We have the bandwidth issues. Our picture doesn't show up. So we don't expect people to be perfect. It's part of owning it, is that accountability. So with that, let's jump into the importance of communication. And it may seem strange that right away I'm talking about feelings, and this is a lot of that emotional intelligence side that many of us have talked about. But there are these feelings of trust that most of us relate to. We want to have a sense of being safe and that safety. We want security, to know what's available. Where is that safety net, so to speak? A sense of the same or familiar is what people look for in a trust relationship, and belief that there's a greater good. So when you think about your company, whether you're a 1099, an individual, not-for-profit, fees on, all of us, whomever we engage in, we want to make sure that they know there's a greater good than simply saving the business. And especially right now, follow through on promises, a consistency, and you might think that's the same as the familiar, but the familiar means we're comfortable with it. A consistency means we know we can rely on it. And then when you think about ownership and accountability that I mentioned earlier. So all of these are the feelings that people say, when I feel all of this, I feel like I can trust a company, I feel like I can trust a contract, a person. And let's face it, while we may engage with a company, we buy through the person who we're talking with. So some trust ideas. Trust and respect go hand in glove. So you may think, well, these are things about respect. We do want to think about respect. Trust is not to be expected, nor is it to be commanded or demanded. Simply because you may be an authority on something, or you have the cards, so to speak, all the cards, it doesn't work that way. At the most, we'll get people who are compliant, who go along with things. If they don't trust us, they'll constantly look elsewhere. So trust is to be earned. And if we think about that and even express it and tell people we want to earn your business, we want to prove that that we live up to our mission, those are really good things that show humility too. So communication and trust. And thinking about some of the ways that we've been talking, think share early and often, even if things change. So you may have shared with your team that you were going to stay open throughout this, and now things have changed. That's okay. I'm going to talk about what happens when it changes. Own those changes. You can say on March 17th, we decided that we would stay open through the end of April. And now as of March 30th, we're making that change because of. And we want to give people that reason behind it, not simply we can't stay open anymore because. We want to explain we're choosing to do this because we're respecting the safer at home, or we're respecting the social at a distance. So ensure that there's clarity in your message. You communicate really well for people who communicate similarly. We have different temperaments and personalities, and now we're mixing in fear and discomfort in that. So the clarity in the message means think about ways you can communicate, how brief you can be, even doing a PowerPoint when you don't typically, sharing it via email, via video, multiple ways, and I'm going to bring that up in a minute. Allow for questions. We allowed for the networking at the beginning, we'll allow for questions at the end. Even if you have a short call with people to make an announcement, it's really important that people feel like they can be heard. That's part of feeling that safety and that belonging. Be accountable to the impacts of your efforts. You may really have worked to not full production or something else that's happening, and you know that it's impacting other people. So it's part of that accountability that we trust when people say, it's really unfortunate that we've had to lay off or furlough a couple of people, and we're working toward getting them back. We also know this affects the output. And as you share that and you talk about how it impacts you, the community, you meaning the business, the community, and your clients, people realize that that's very human and that you're making the most of what you can. And then consistently communicate. You might think, well, you said earlier, share early and often. Yes, but just don't share when there's a change. You want to consistently communicate. If it's been a day, let them know nothing's changed and yet we're still working toward X or Y. And that way people know that they've been touched, so to speak, and that builds trust. So how to and not to share information. So we're going to go into some do's and don'ts on this. And so some of the do's: do be swift. If you know something, act on it, but don't be impulsive. So there's a difference in being swift with your communication, but not impulsive. So we don't want to just react, we want to respond. The difference in responding and reacting means I'm swift if I respond by gathering all the information, say from the Chamber website, getting all of this wonderful information from South Tampa Chamber, and then processing it and then swiftly communicating, as opposed to hearing something on the news or gathering from a lot of different sources and then just reacting with something that you may end up changing later. Be open, because we don't want to put too many people in between you and your communication. So what I mean by being open is you may say you have an open door policy or hope people know you have an open door policy. At this time, that may mean you're reaching out a little bit more to express that openness. And it's not about disrespecting the layers of your leadership who might be in between you and folks who call on your clients. It's that you don't want to put so many people in between that it feels like an us and them, because you do want to utilize technology like we're talking about. We don't want to rely solely on it. For those of you who joined us last week, I said the very same thing about communication and remote work. This is true with trust. We want to use technology. We don't want to rely solely on it. Some people aren't as comfortable. I know Diane was kind enough to share before we got started about assisting somebody who wasn't comfortable with it. That's great. If though we only rely on technology, we can lose trust because we lose that connection, that face-to-face or voice on the call. And right now you might say, well, that's all we really have is the technology. The phone, believe it or not, makes some people feel even more comfortable because it's been around longer. So check in with individuals. Don't hover or expect sharing. You may check in with them. They may not want to tell you much. Let that go, because they'll trust that if you keep coming back when they're ready to talk, they will. Could be clients or team members. Offer various modes of communication. I mentioned that earlier. Because don't just stick solely to email. So you may think about, okay, if I've emailed this, did I send it on, did I communicate it through Monday.com? Did I communicate it on our Teams group? Did I communicate it via text? Did I record a video in case somebody didn't see it? And it's not about just you being in their face, it's about people's comfort with what type of communication they prefer and what they trust from a resource. And then something else about sharing information is consider the history of what you've done or leaders in your position have done, your company has done in the past, because we don't want to neglect past mistakes. This is a time for that pride and humility, as a lot of you have heard me say, they're both very useful in our professionalism. Is if we say, in the past, we haven't had something like this, and yet back then we made this mistake. Please know we're working on how to course correct. Or if you make a mistake now, then consider that history and move forward. Just acknowledge it. So those are some do's and don'ts. And here's some trust inhibiting language. And I hesitated to put this on a slide, but because these are things not to say, so I'll underscore that. So we don't want to say things like, trust me, it's going to be okay, honestly, or to be honest. Now, these are at any time, not simply now. I encourage you, strike these from your vocabulary. If you want to have a little game, if a lot of people in your office typically say some of these things, have a kitty for something for charity, just to break yourselves of saying these expressions, to tell you the truth or truthfully. Somebody says, can I be honest with you? I often say, I thought you were. Please tell me if you're not going to be. What, are you going to raise your left hand when you're honest and your right when you're not? You want to get away from these. We often use them for emphasis. The reality is we're being honest and truthful a lot, and the best thing to do is tell the truth because we don't have to remember anything else. We don't want to tell people to relax or to calm down. These things are meant well by us, but what they end up doing is making people feel like, I am relaxed as they're screaming, or I am calm. But they don't create a vibe or a sense that people are really going to all of a sudden calm down when you say, hey, Debbie, calm down, or Debbie, relax. I don't feel a sense of relax. You feel a sense of judgment. Please don't tell people to go with the flow. This one, some people resist, but at the same time, if you say, well, you just go with the flow, I talked about not saying it is what it is last week. The reason you don't want to say just go with the flow is people are seeking that sense of, remember, security and safety. They want consistency. So if we go back to the beginning, if we say go with the flow, people don't know what that means. We want to give more definition. We don't want to say it's a no-brainer that we have to close, something like that. And we don't want to say it's just common sense. No-brainer and common sense also make people feel as though they should have figured it out on their own. So if we put words like this out there, we run the risk of people not communicating back with us, and we break trust because they're not communicating that with us. Lastly, please don't say, I know or I understand. Some of you heard me say that as well about remote work. I know and I understand feel like you're being empathetic and showing emotional intelligence. What they're really doing is they're cutting people off. So instead of those, I have some other options, and we can certainly talk about it as we get into questions. But these are things not to say. So let's quickly move into good, positive, trust-building language. Trust-building language includes, what are your concerns? So if you ask somebody after you share something that's going on, an update, if you say, what are your concerns? The catch is we have to listen and then not defend the concerns. We can listen, talk about the concerns, and then see if people feel comfortable with them. Instead of somebody gives a concern, like, I'm concerned we're going to lose all of our business, and you say, oh, that won't happen. If you say, okay, respecting your concern, we're going to lose all of our business, please know we've reached out to half of our members of the chamber already, and they're being very supportive, and we've received paid invoices. So if we say things like that, then we can address the concerns. How do you feel about this? Now, for those of you who are thinker-minded, for the rest of us who are feelers first, the how do you feel about this resonates with us. If you don't, it might make you seem uncomfortable. That's okay. If you ask people, what do you think about this and how do you feel, that gives them a chance to go with whichever part of the brain or their temperament they tend to exercise first. Then when people say they feel nervous or scared, just let them know that they have every right to feel that way. What can we do to move forward? What can I do to assist? So you can ask them what questions come to mind. If you're going to reach out to people, you can say what questions would come to mind if you were one of our customers. You can ask them to put themselves in another person's shoes, which assists you with building trust because they know you're taking their information in. I write considering ... here because if you ask people something, you can say, considering you're working remotely and we've had this change in our business, what's the first thing you would like us to do to show you that we're still in a partnership? So some of those things, how can I assist or what may I do, are ways that you can then show them that you're working together. So what can I do to assist? What may I do? Please don't necessarily say, what may I do for you? But it's more, what may I do in order to X? Because people aren't feeling as though you have to, quote unquote, help them. They would like to know that you're working with them. Trust is built through collaboration and partnership, not so much you're seeming like you have to help someone else. And lastly, here's what we know so far. Here's what we know so far is a really good response to a lot of people's questions or concerns because it's changing so quickly. This is part of the trust building at this changing time. Here's what I know so far. So that brings us to what I call the 3 elements of trust, which are in that article. And my expression for this is let trust grow, let trust grow, L-E-T. And that means logic, empathy, and transparency. Now here's where I'm going to stop the share and explain these a little bit differently. Also give you a chance to, instead of just watching the screen, see me a little bit for that social interaction part of it. So on the L, logic. Logic plays into trust because when we say, here's what we know so far, we're really attempting to show something in a linear fashion. Many of us, myself included, I'm a bit more emotionally based and tangential. The reality is we want to show logic. We want to say based on X, we are doing Y, or here are the facts as we know them for our industry. Here's what's happened thus far in Tampa Bay. So when you express logic, you're providing people with a platform for that security and that consistency of knowing where they are. They feel safer with information. It's just got to be based on logic. So that's the L. The E is empathy. And a lot of times people think, well, logic and empathy don't seem like they go together. They do. They work beautifully together because now we're getting to the feeling side of it. Empathy means I feel for what you're going through, and here's how we can move forward. Are you able to put yourself in other people's shoes? So to build trust, when you have logic and then you show empathy by saying, appreciating this is impacting you this way, as opposed to I know or I understand, then you're really putting yourself as a companion or partner with them. That last part is transparency. And transparency means exactly what it seems like it means. Showing all of those good things and, as they say, showing the warts and all. Because if we're not transparent, if we made a mistake, or transparent if somebody had a good win, if somebody was able to assist a client, celebrate it. And this transparency, if you're able to share that you have some concerns and yet you're working through them, then people really say, I got the information, I got this connection with you, and now you're being transparent. You're being straightforward, and that's how we, quote unquote, let trust grow. So think about those things as you move forward, because that's where we are, is how do we move forward with this? So lastly, before we have an opportunity to share with each other, is what are the next steps for moving forward? When we think about moving forward, reach out to each person. If it's a family member, if it's a team member, if you've had a disagreement with somebody, reach out to them now. If you've had a client that's been difficult, if you have your best client, but reach out to each person individually. Think about, not necessarily now, but remember thinking about next steps, is consider a survey. You could survey your team members right now on what their concerns are, all those questions that I asked earlier. You could set that up and then have a town hall meeting to address the concerns. If you're not getting people to give you information, they may want an anonymous survey so they They can trust that whatever they say gets blended in. That's okay. It doesn't mean they don't trust you. It means that the time of uncertainty makes them uncomfortable. You can share the results of such a survey, or if you reach out to each person and you get permission, you could share the results collectively. And then have a plan. Tell people what you believe your plan is right now. So I like to say the truth as we know it at the time. So if on April 1st, tomorrow, you say, here's our tentative plan. We plan to be closed, or we plan to work remotely until the 30th, and then we plan to X, and that you're going to have updates. That's a plan. Knowing when you're going to update them is a plan. Knowing when you're going to make decisions is a plan. Share that plan with everybody, again, verbally, a video, via email, different ways that you communicate. Execute your plan. And if you have changes, then communicate them. Update each team member. So you notice I have this very linear right now. It's more like a cycle. Reach out, survey, share results, have a plan, share the plan, execute the plan. Oh, update them, check in with them. So this is a way for you to move forward now and in the future as you're building trust. People knowing that they're heard is one of the best ways to start establishing trust, to maintain that trust, and to grow it. Lastly, stay in touch. Just stay in touch, stay available, not to where you're maxed out and you're exhausted, rather stay in touch with availability. Availability, as we mentioned earlier, and accountability creates that foundation for trust. So as we look back, we looked at the importance of communication, how to and not to share information, 3 elements of trust, that LET that we had of the logic, empathy, and transparency, and next steps moving forward. So hopefully we hit the goal, which is assist you in establishing, maintaining, and reinforcing trust in these times of uncertainty. With that, if there's anything we missed or I overlooked, I will stop the share and we can address any of them now. Is there something I can answer or cover for anyone? You are muted, but if you want to be unmuted.
Hi, Debbie, it's Ken. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've seen in the media, the different ways various companies have gone about, let's say, doing it right and not doing it as right when it comes to, layoffs, be them temporary or permanent, what you've seen that you don't recommend, what you've seen that you do recommend?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for asking. And anybody else chime in as well, because certainly it's my view and my opinion is that any of the companies that are doing things to assist on the medical side, I know right now there's a drive at West Shore Mall where they're asking for any equipment for medical. So things that are going well are people coming up with a plan, getting it in place, and then communicating it when they have it fully executable external to their company. That's a really good way to do it. The things I've seen that aren't so great are people, complaining, saying, we have to do this and we hate to do it, but we had to lay off all these people. And they're saying, they're seeking what I would call sympathy or commiserating, and that's not the right way to do it. With furloughs or layoffs, it's important to describe the difference. I know some people have reached out to me and told me they're so embarrassed that they've been furloughed, and I said, this is you have every right to feel that way. This is a time to think about they wanted to assist you as much as possible and they're still paying your medical. They would still like to bring you back. This is a time to be grateful. So I feel like people highlighting things that their individual team members, groups, or their company have done right with a sense of gratitude is a way to build trust moving forward. And the way to not is to complain or to just remain completely silent in this. And really, Darren did a great job last week talking about the crisis communication. And I was talking with one of my clients about, they asked me something similar. What do we do? They provide technical support. It hasn't changed anything for what they do. They're in the financial industry. And I said, reach out to each of them separately and then make sure that they know you're not trying to sell anything right now. Don't think about selling a service. think even some of these cleaning companies who are saying we can clean and sterilize your office, it's great to offer that. It's just make sure it's about the importance of the safety, and you're offering some sort of special rate because you respect businesses are challenged. So I hope that addresses a few of them.
Yeah, that was a great explanation. Why do you think that we haven't seen more companies doing more fundamental things like setting up sessions on the day after the layoff where they actually can help their employees go through applying for unemployment? I've been rather shocked that I haven't heard a single interview on TV with a company that anyone's doing that. Do you think that would be a good thing to do or a bad thing to do?
As respecting that from a legal perspective, there may be some reasons that I don't know. I headed up legal and product delegation for General Motors, but that was a long time ago and things have changed. I do agree with you and believe it's a good thing to do. To your question, the reason I believe people are not doing it is they're also scared. They don't know the answers and they weren't prepared. And that's respectable right now because it is new. At the same time, I like your idea of if you set it up to say, look, we have HR on, we have this available, we may not know the answers, but let's see if we can get an employment attorney, if we can get somebody who could assist you. They could ask somebody who probably wouldn't charge to assist people with ideas on their resume. I think people are afraid, and I hate to think that it's a litigious fear. I think some of it is, but at the core, I think it's a human fear that they're thinking, if I tell them incorrectly, I'm going to hurt them even more. And I believe that some people are suffering a lot emotionally themselves, that once they get through the layoff, they just feel like if they put their head up for anything, that they're going to be so vulnerable. But I still think it's worthwhile.
Hey, Debbie, this is Steve. There also seems to be some confusion because my daughter was furloughed, and some of her friends were saying that if we apply for unemployment, then my company has the opportunity to, release me or have issues on what you can actually reach out to do as a furloughed employee versus layoffs and that type of stuff. That might be hesitating some folks from reaching out and communicating.
They might be, and that's where I find a lot of the workshops and information from different firms, what they're doing. And Chris, you're going to be doing a session. I know Chris was on earlier, but things like make sure we're getting to the right sources for them, because there is some confusion about, can you apply for unemployment if you've been furloughed? Can you apply for, and that's not my specialty, but the things that I've been hearing consistently are that they still can. Again, I just wouldn't want to offer any legal advice when I certainly am not qualified to. The best thing to do is see where those resources are and ask first the employer and say, where are you getting your information, and what can I do to make sure that I'm honoring the company and my family both at the same time by doing what's best. A lot of you hear me say when I talk about negotiations, because that's a negotiation. There was a decision to furlough versus lay off, is to say, it's not about me getting my way or you getting your way. It's about what's best for this time. So that calm really assists with building trust.
And to answer your question, Debbie, yes, you can. If you go on furlough, you can get unemployment right now.
Okay, thanks. Because I knew you would know, and then I also knew it wasn't my place to say, so I appreciate it.
I think perhaps tomorrow our session, Chris, is specific to employers because we want to make sure that our members that are employers understand what their rights are and how to take care of their employees. We want to outlay for them what their options are to be able to take care of their employees. But we are unfortunately receiving more and more communications here at the office from some of our members who have been laid off or furloughed, and so perhaps we'll look at doing some other type of educational opportunity next week for those individuals, separate from the employer side, but for those individuals who may need some assistance. So I took a note here, and I'll make sure that we look into that as maybe another program for a little bit later time.
Thank you. Did I miss any ideas or questions or thoughts that you wanted to explore? Because if I don't have the answer, probably somebody on the call does. Well, with that, I think each of us knows that the South Tampa Chamber is here for you. If I can assist, most of you know how to reach me. Feel free if it's a quick question. If I know it, I'll answer it. If I don't, I will certainly attempt to get you to the right person. Because when we think about trust and we think about this time of uncertainty, there are sincere, effective, professional ways that we can establish, maintain, and grow it even in these changing times. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I'm going to unmute the room. I'm going to let all of you stay in here. We're scheduled till 11:30, so you all are welcome to unmute yourselves and take some time to continue to network here in this platform. I am going to go ahead and end the recording, and we will have that up on the website later today if there's any additional information or if you want to share that with anyone. Thank you again so much to Debbie, and we'll forward out her contact information as well in case there's anyone looking for some additional resources for their business. But I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, but I'm going to leave the room open for you until 11:30. And we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow with our presentation regarding employers and some solutions for them. And we'll have some additional programming coming out next week that we should have up on the website by tomorrow. But in the meantime, keep networking, keep connecting, and I look forward to seeing all of you again soon.
Hi, everybody.
Thank
Debbie,
you.
great job. This is Ken. I just uploaded a simple little screenshot that shows everyone how to, put their picture up for a background.
Thank
And
you.
Debbie, if you're seeing that yours not working, what I recommend is